All right, everyone, we're back. We've gone over the main components of the research paper and some general tips and requirements for writing. Now let's go ahead and go over the main resources for this assignment. And I'm asking you to go out and familiarize yourself with these resources and then provide some feedback at the end. So first of all, the Purdue OWL, or the Purdue Online Writing Lab, is the main source for style and citation guidance. So it's kind of like the owl on Winnie the Pooh. The owl is the sage source for advice on writing. So let's take a look at the resources that they have for IEEE style, and here it is. Okay, so here for IEEE style, they give the general format. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. And just to let you know, if you find yourself writing a research paper that requires a different format, like MLA or APA or ACS, then the Purdue Online Writing Lab also has style guides for those. At this point, because the main purpose of this is to prepare students to submit to the Journal of Advanced Technological Education, and they use IEEE, because it started out as an engineering publication, that's what we're going to focus on here. Okay, so here for the general format, I'll just give you a little bit of an overview. They have guidelines, they have ads, and then they go through each of these specific sections that we've discussed, like the abstract. They talk about how to format your headings. If you have note to practitioners or nomenclature, then you're going to include that as well. Like here we have some nomenclature that's for equations. It's like a Greek letters that may or may not apply to you. Other than that, of big interest to us is how to format the in-text citations. So here you're going to use your citations in a numbered manner. So they're going to be in the order that they were cited. And they will be then compiled in the references as endnotes. So here, instead of using the parenthetical notation where you might say author, comma, year, or author, comma, page in parentheses, like you might have seen in some other styles, here you're just going to use a number that's bracketed for your in-text citation. Okay. And they give some more details on that that'll allow you to go ahead and explore on your own. Now here, for the reference list, you're going to put your references at the end, and it's going to start on a separate page. And let's see if we can find an example here of the reference list. So we can see that here we have this general format for books, author, title, volume, edition, the city, state, and country where it was published, publisher, and then the year. And then at that references section, you're just going to have the bracketed 1 and then the full citation for that reference. Okay, so a periodical, that could be a journal, right? So this one is of interest to us. And we can see that the format here is going to be author, then title. The title is in quotations. Journal is italicized. Then the volume, number, page range, month, year, and DOI. So these style guides are really helpful because we don't really need to memorize this format. Once you have used it a bunch of times, it may kind of come naturally to you. But even if not, it really doesn't matter. You can go ahead and pull up your style guide, look for the type of reference that you're interested in, and it'll tell you exactly how to do it. Okay, we also have citation formats in the references section for websites, thesis and dissertation, even for conferences and presentations. Okay, one last thing that I want to point out here before we move on is that for IEEE style, very important, like I mentioned in the general guidelines, you need to have a caption for your figure. So each figure needs to be numbered and have a caption. So here they give some guidelines for that. So here we have guidelines for table. And we see that the table's title has small caps formatting, and then under the table in that caption position, then we have a note that's going to describe the table. So here, instead of having like table 1 and then a caption, we have table 1 on top, and then the note is in that caption position on the bottom. Let's see, what about figures? Okay, so here's an example of a figure in an IEEE paper, and you'll notice that it's different than a table. So here we actually have figure 1 and then our note that describes in the caption position what the figure is about and what's going on with it. Okay, equations may or may not apply to you. If you have an equation, you can use Microsoft Word to write out that equation and insert it, and then you'll see that you just have a reference here, which is a 1 in parentheses. In this instance, we don't have a caption, but in the text, you would refer to equation 1, for example, as you're expounding on that and explaining the significance of it, how it fits into your work. Okay, great. So going back to the main assignment, we just went over the style resources. You guys can take a look at that. I do encourage you to do so. And then also you should look at that again when you're getting ready to submit your paper. Okay, and then next, let's talk a little bit about passive and active voice. This is something that I find to be pretty important because we want our writing to be objective. So for that reason, in this lesson, we're focusing on third person passive voice. The passive voice is really common in academic and formal writing, but it's not always used in scientific writing. For our purposes, we're going to use that, but there are some journal like proceedings of National Academy of Sciences, Science, and Nature that are going to use the active voice instead of the passive voice. So let's take a look at this resource on voice and point of view from CSU SM and see if we can get a little bit more understanding of that. Okay, so let's take a look at some examples of the active voice. So this is probably what you're more familiar with. Here in active voice, we would say something like Angel wrote the paper, or undergraduate students completed the survey. So it's pretty direct. And the passive voice, on the other hand, it's more like you're writing as though you're a passive observer, rather than saying that we completed this research, the research was completed. Or here, the paper was written. The online survey was completed by undergraduate students at CSU SM. So here, even with the paper was written, we've taken out references to the individual. Okay, so we have active and passive voice here. And then let's talk a little bit about point of view, because I've asked you to use third person. So let's see what's first, second, third person look like, just as a review for you guys. So for first person, it's usually about personal experiences, right? You're talking from your own experience. You're using pronouns like I, me, we, or us. And that's something you're generally going to avoid in academic writing in order to make it more objective. Second person is going to directly address the reader. So, for example, you're going to say you, like you should consider this hypothesis. Maybe if you were explaining how to do something, like you should add HCl to the flask, okay? But this is not something that we're going to do in our research papers. Instead, we're going to use the third person. Like I mentioned earlier, you would say HCl was added to the flask, not add HCl to the flask. Okay, so we're not going to give our materials and methods like a recipe. We're going to give it like it's a report of what happened in a formal manner. So here, the third person point of view is going to identify people by noun or proper noun. And it's the perspective of he, she, they, or it. So it's like there's an observer. And it's very common for formal or academic writing. And usually you're going to use it for an unnamed person. Okay. And then let's see. Any other helpful notes here? So now, instead of he or she, we sometimes use they because it's less sexist or it might be preferred. And so here they're just saying you can ask your teacher about that, what their preference is. I think that's going to be less important here unless your study has, something to do with conducting a survey where you're taking responses from certain individuals, or maybe you have some qualitative data that you're going to describe that has to do with people. Okay, so that's a brief review of the tense and voice resource from CSUSM. And they have more examples and resources here. So you guys please take a look at that and review it anytime that it's useful for you. Okay, great. So next, writing concisely. So this is really important in scientific writing because we really want to get to the point and we want to make our writing as easy to understand as possible. So if you have concise writing, it's going to be easier to understand and more accessible for a broader audience. So more people are going to read it. And that's really what we want. Another thing here is that there may be rules that require you to be concise, because if you're writing a poster abstract for a conference presentation, or if you're doing a paper, usually there'll be a word or a page limit. So it may be that the best thing to do is just to start writing and then go back and edit it to make it more concise. But always do, think about trying to be the most direct and easily understandable as you can as an author. Okay, a good way to check on this is just to read your writing aloud. When you read it aloud, then you'll be able to tell if something doesn't make sense or if maybe there's a more direct and short way to say it. Is there anything that's unclear? Or perhaps is there anything unnecessary that you can simply just take out? Or maybe a more simple way to make the statement that you're trying to get across. Okay, another option is you can use spelling and grammar checking tools in your word processor. So if you have access to Microsoft Word, this is really good. But I just want to encourage you also to take the suggestions, but to think critically about them. So don't automatically accept all of those corrections, but even take the correction and read it out loud to yourself and say, does this really still have the same meaning that I was trying to make? Okay, so just like if we're working with artificial intelligence, we're not going to take what we get at face value. We're going to think critically and say, does this correction actually make sense? Okay, and then as you're going through this process, you're having to read your paper out loud. Maybe you're explaining to somebody else. This is going to help get you ready for your presentations because you're already going to be used to explaining things in a simple manner. The other thing here, and one of the reasons why that third person passive voice is a little bit controversial, is because it tends, in the way that the writing is approached, to lend itself to long-windedness. And we really want to avoid that. So we have to be extra conscious of writing concisely, and then, maybe going back and taking things out that are unnecessary or shortening them, because we don't want to be verbose. We might lose our reader. We really want to keep our readers on board. Okay, so one more thing, one more resource that I want to offer to you is that If you feel like you cannot deal with the style guide, you've looked at it and you become familiar with it, but you don't really want to go back to that, and you don't want to try and memorize another style of citations, then there are a couple of resources. So this one is specifically from Pierce Library, but you probably have something similar at your institution if you're not at Pierce. The article that I'm working on with my students has to do with the soil microbiome, and that soil came from industrial hemp fields. So I was just looking for a soil microbiome article that had to do with cannabis, and I found something that popped up. So the resource that I want to show you guys right now is that you can actually get the citation pretty readily with your library resources, and then you can copy your citation to the clipboard. So this is really fantastic. You can also do the same thing with Google Scholar. So this is nice. The only problem is that the IEEE style that we're using in JATE is not on Google Scholar, and it's also not in most of the library resources or search tools. So that's a good tip maybe for your classes or for other papers. I wanted to share that with you just in case you didn't know. However, since we're doing IEEE style, we're really looking for something that can help us with that. So you can use the citation machine. This is actually something that came up as an ad when we were on the Purdue OWL. So I feel pretty confident about this. So the citation machine will create a citation for you. It's going to give you the fields. You can put in the title and the author of the article, or you can put in the URL for the website where you found the information. It'll create the citation, but just like I said with the grammar checking resources, you really want to be vigilant that the sections are all completed and that the citation looks good at the end. So one of the common problems, especially if you got your article from a DOI or from an online source, is that if you don't put in the date you accessed it, it will often show ND, which stands for no date in the citation. So you want to look for things like that, like maybe stray commas or little abbreviations that don't really make sense and are not pertinent to you. Okay, so let me show you what that looks like. And this is something that I still use even now. And we have ads, maybe like a little bit more prevalent than we had on the Purdue OWL site. But here we go. You can use this for other styles as well, but they have the IEEE citation generator. And let's just try one of these articles. So I'm just going to pick something that I have open right now. It's kind of interesting here about cell migration and adhesion. So I'm just going to go ahead here and search for the journal article by the title. Here we go, we're searching. And then when we find the article that we're interested in, we can go ahead and click on Cite, and then we'll get a chance to review the information and also to add any of the parts that were not there. Like, for example, the date that it was accessed. Okay, so here we have the name of the journal, the publication year and month, the article title. And then when we go on to the next screen, we have the opportunity to fill in any other information that we have. Good job. Okay, and then from there you can edit your information and then copy your citation and then paste it into your reference list. So like I mentioned, I am looking to get some feedback from you guys. So if you can please answer the feedback questions at the end of the assignment, that would be fantastic so that we can keep improving. And thank you for joining me today.